So what if I told you that in this year alone, like right now in 2026, a single mistake in how your company handles its data could cost, on average, $10.22 million.
Right. It's a staggering number.
It really is. And worse, what if the system making that mistake was entirely autonomous?
Exactly. I mean, it forces you to completely rethink what risk actually looks like inside an organization today. Yeah. You're no longer just worried about a rogue employee, right? You were worried about the code making decisions while you sleep.
It's terrifying. But anyway, welcome to episode 16.2026, Big Data, Big Responsibility. This is the 16th deep dive of this year's Bits and Bytes in Business show.
Glad to be here for this one.
Yeah, so today we are taking a massive stack of research, legal briefings, and technical reports regarding the 2026 Texas AI and data governance landscape.
Which is a lot to get through.
It is, yeah, and we're distilling it down into what you actually need to know.
Yeah.
We're going to unpack why data responsibility has transitioned from, just a nice corporate PR talking point into a brutal, hard-coded regulatory and financial imperative.
It's survival now.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
If you are building, managing, or even just using data systems in 2026, the ground beneath you has completely shifted.
I want to jump in right here just before we get into the architecture of these new laws.
Yeah, go for it.
If you are relying on this kind of technical and strategic analysis to navigate your career, make sure you hit subscribe right now.
Definitely do that.
And you also need to head over to my YouTube channel. The technical landscape is, it's fragmenting so rapidly. And on the channel, I upload exclusive course materials, system architecture diagrams, and follow-up deep dives that will keep you on the absolute cutting edge of information systems.
A great resource.
Thanks. Yeah, you just really cannot afford to fall behind on this material.
Right. So make sure you do that. Now, let's ground ourselves real quick. Last week, we spent an hour exploring how advanced data visualization is fundamentally altering executive decision-making.
Episode 15.2026, Visualizing the Boardroom.
Yes, exactly. We looked at how real-time dashboards are projecting, future realities for the C-suite. But today, we are ripping up the floorboards.
Oh, we're going deep.
We really are. We're looking at the immense legal and ethical weight of the data that's actually feeding those visualizations. Because if the data beneath your dashboard is non-compliant or biased or illegally obtained,
then that beautiful visualization isn't giving you an edge.
No.
It is actively documenting your liability.
Man, that's such a good way to put it.
We really have to acknowledge the paradigm shift that brings us to this point. We've decisively exited the experimental phase of artificial intelligence.
Yeah, the playground is closed.
It really is. 3 years ago, companies were treating generative models like toys, summarizing emails, generating some marketing copy.
Like the fun stuff.
Exactly. But today, in 2026, we are deploying high-stakes agentic systems deeply embedded into core infrastructure.
Yeah.
AI is no longer just a tool waiting for a human prompt. It's an agent acting on behalf of your company.
Querying databases, denying loans.
Rerouting supply chains, all autonomously.
Which introduces just an incredibly thorny legal concept, right?
Yeah.
If an autonomous agent makes a catastrophic error, who do you actually sue?
Right. Is it the vendor?
Is the engineer?
The CEO?
Well, the state of Texas has answered that question quite aggressively.
To say the least.
Yeah. This new reality is governed by two foundational frameworks that are fully operational right now.
Okay, what are they?
The Texas Responsible AI Governance Act, or TRAIGA, and the fully matured enforcement of the Texas Data Privacy and Security Act, the TDPSA.
Let's start with TRAIGA, because the mechanics of this legislation, which just went live on January 1st, 2026, are totally different from what we are seeing in Europe or even California. Very different. So the European Union took a risk-based approach, right? Categorizing systems into unacceptable risk, high risk, and so on.
Right.
Colorado went with a consumer-centric model heavily focused on disclosures.
Okay, so what did Texas do?
Texas pioneered an intent-based liability framework. It targets the purposeful misuse of machine-based systems.
Wow.
And it applies to anyone doing business in the state, producing products used by its residents, or developing AI within its borders.
Okay, let's unpack this. I'm going to play devil's advocate here.
Go for it.
Intent-based liability sounds like criminal law. How do you prove the quote-unquote intent of an algorithm?
That's the million-dollar question.
Right, because by definition, machine learning models evolve based on their training data. They find patterns humans can't even see.
Absolutely.
So if a model starts, discriminating against a specific demographic, the developer might be just as surprised as the user.
Usually they are.
So how does a regulator prove the developer intended for that to happen?
That is the defining tension of TRAIGA. You can no longer hide behind the black box defense.
Ah, so no more we didn't know.
Exactly. If your AI system causes harm and the Texas Attorney General launches an investigation, simply throwing your hands up and saying, oh, well, we don't know why the neural network did that, is legally insufficient.
So it's not just about acting with malice.
No. Under this framework, intent is heavily tied to your design and mitigation protocols.
So it's about proving you didn't intend it through your engineering documentation.
Essentially, yes. If you fail to implement rigorous bias testing, or if you fail to document the lineage of your training data...
Or you just ignore red flags in testing.
Exactly. If you ignore glaring warning signs during the testing phase, regulators can argue that your gross negligence serves as a proxy for intent.
Oh, wow. Gross negligence as a proxy for intent.
You have to build a mathematically verifiable paper trail demonstrating your system was explicitly designed to avoid the state's 5 prohibited uses.
Okay, let's walk through those 5 prohibitions because they aren't just vague guidelines. They are hard lines.
Very hard lines.
The first one is the manipulation of human behavior.
Think about a social media recommendation engine, right?
Okay.
If you optimize an algorithm purely for time on site, and that algorithm learns that surfacing increasingly radical, outrage-inducing content keeps users scrolling.
Which we've definitely seen happen.
Right. And if that eventually pushes them towards self-harm or physical violence, you are in violation.
Wow.
You cannot intentionally design a system where the architecture incites violence or criminal activity.
Makes total sense.
Yeah.
The second prohibition is unlawful discrimination. I imagine this ties directly into existing civil rights frameworks.
It does, but it brings them into the algorithmic age.
Okay.
You cannot deploy a system with the intent to discriminate against protected classes in housing, employment, or lending.
Like redlining, but with code.
Exactly.
Yeah.
If your mortgage approval AI uses zip codes as a proxy for race, and you haven't built guardrails to prevent that, you are crossing the line.
Okay. And the third and fourth deal with fundamental rights and exploitation. So constitutional infringement, meaning you can't build systems intended to impair U.S. constitutional rights.
Correct.
And explicit content and exploitation, which specifically outlaws systems designed to produce or distribute child pornography or unlawful deepfakes.
Yeah, right. And the fifth rule is particularly noteworthy given the events of recent years. Political viewpoint discrimination.
Oh, interesting.
Under TRAIGA, you are strictly prohibited from intentionally deplatforming or demonetizing users solely based on their political beliefs using automated systems.
Man, looking at these 5 prohibitions, I am putting myself in the shoes of a project manager or like a lead software architect.
It's stressful.
The burden here is astronomical. You aren't just writing code to make a product function. You're essentially writing code to stand up in a court of law.
It fundamentally changes the job description of a technologist. You cannot just throw data into a cluster and see what insights top out anymore. You must be able to articulate the legal and ethical boundaries of your data pipeline at every single stage of development.
Which means the traditional silo where, the engineers sit in the basement writing code and the lawyers sit on the top floor writing policies is completely broken.
It is entirely obsolete. And honestly, this is a systemic crisis in the workforce right now.
I can imagine.
When you have database architects who don't understand civil liability or compliance officers who don't understand how a large language model tokenizes data,
that's a recipe for disaster.
You invite multi-million-dollar regulatory fines. And it is exactly why the market is demanding a completely new breed of professional.
It requires a hybrid skill set.
Precisely. Programs like the BBA in Management Information Systems at the Dr. Sam Pack College of Business at Tarleton State University were built for this exact intersection.
Oh, that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, it's a traditional program, but it is specifically engineered to balance those hard technical skills with deep business and legal acumen.
So you're not just learning the tech.
No, it trains you to understand not just the technical how of building an agentic AI model, but to master the legal and business why.
Right.
You literally have to speak both Python and policy to survive this regulatory environment.
I love that phrase, Python and policy. But TRAIGA only governs the outputs, right, like what the AI does.
Right.
What about the inputs? But we still have to talk about the data actually feeding these systems.
That brings us to the Texas Data Privacy and Security Act, the TDPSA.
Okay.
And the critical update for 2026 is that the training wheels have officially been removed.
Because there used to be a grace period, right?
Yeah. When TDPSA first went into effect back in July 2024, it included a 30-day automatic cure period.
So they had a warning.
Basically, if the state found you in violation, say you were collecting user data without proper consent, you had 30 days to fix your architecture before they actually penalized you. And now,
As of January 1st, 2025, that provision expired. The Attorney General now moves straight to enforcement.
yikes. And the rights granted to Texas residents under this act are incredibly robust.
Very.
I want to dig into the technical reality of these rights. For example, the right of correction and deletion.
Oh, this is a big one.
If I'm a Texas resident, I can demand that a company completely wipe my personal information from their servers.
Yes, you can.
From a legal standpoint, that's a great consumer protection. But from a database architecture standpoint, isn't that an absolute nightmare?
It is literally one of the hardest engineering challenges in modern enterprise IT.
I bet.
Think about a standard relational database. Your customer ID is tied to your purchase history,
Right.
which is tied to inventory systems, which is tied to tax reporting tables.
It's all connected.
Exactly. So if a user says, delete me, you can't just go in and delete their row in the user table.
Because it breaks the relational logic.
Exactly. You get orphaned records in your sales tables, and suddenly your quarterly revenue reports don't add up.
Exactly. So companies have to build incredibly complex soft deletion architectures or anonymization scripts that scramble the PII, the personally identifiable information, while somehow maintaining the transactional integrity of the database.
That sounds incredibly expensive.
It is. And you have to do this while honoring universal opt-out signals, like global privacy control settings in web browsers.
Wait, how does that work?
So if a user's browser sends an automated signal saying, do not sell my data, your back-end systems must recognize and obey that signal instantly,
Automatically.
without human intervention.
Wow. I do want to touch on one carve-out in this legislation, though, because it feels a bit counterintuitive.
Okay, let's hear it.
Amidst all these super strict rules, TRAIGA amended the older Texas Capture, or Use of Biometric Identifiers Act, or CUBI,
Right.
and they created a safe harbor specifically for biometric data in AI development. Why on earth would they loosen the rules on things like fingerprints and facial recognition?
It's a great question, and it highlights a very sophisticated understanding of how machine learning actually works by the legislature.
Okay.
The amendment allows developers to use biometric data to train and evaluate models without violating the strict consent rules of CUBI, but with massive caveats.
There's always a catch.
Always. The resulting AI system cannot be deployed to uniquely identify a specific individual in the real world, and it absolutely cannot be used for fraud prevention.
Okay, let me see if I understand the distinction here.
Sure.
Let's say a medical research company is building an AI to detect early signs of Parkinson's disease by analyzing human walking gaits.
Good example.
They need to feed that model millions of hours of video footage of people walking.
Correct. They need vast amounts of geometric and biometric data to teach the model what a healthy gait looks like versus an impaired gait.
So under the old rules, they would have had to get explicit written consent from every single person walking in the background of those videos.
Which is impossible.
Right, so this safe harbor basically says you can use that footage to teach the model the generalized physics of human movement, as long as you aren't using the final AI to scan a crowded street and say, oh, that is John Doe, and he has a slight limp.
That is the exact mechanism. You can use the geometry of a human face to train an AI on how skin reacts to light for, say, visual effects software.
Yep.
You cannot use it to build a surveillance tool that cross-references a driver's license database.
That makes total sense.
It allows the foundational science of machine learning to advance in Texas without criminalizing the massive data sets required to teach the system's basic human physics.
But even with that safe harbor, listening to the sheer weight of TRAIGA and TDPSA, like the documentation, the intent-based liability, the loss of grace periods, I can easily imagine a startup founder saying, you know what? Texas is too risky.
Yeah, I'm out.
I'm taking my AI company to a state with looser rules so I can experiment. If the stakes are this high, how does innovation not just grind to a complete halt?
Well, the Texas legislature anticipated that exact flight risk.
They did.
Yes. They recognized that regulation without a pathway for experimentation simply kills the tech sector. So To counterbalance these strict laws, they created the Texas Regulatory Sandbox program.
Okay, I've heard of this.
It's managed by the Department of Information Resources and the Texas AI Council.
I've always found the term sandbox funny in this context.
Right.
It sounds like a playground for toddlers, but we are talking about highly volatile, enterprise-grade technology. How does this sandbox actually operate?
Well, it is a highly structured, legally ring-fenced environment.
Sure.
If a company wants to pilot an innovative, high-stakes AI system that might conflict with existing bureaucratic regulations, they apply to enter the sandbox.
And if they get in?
If approved, they receive a waiver from certain state licensing and regulatory requirements for up to 36 months.
Wow, 36 months of regulatory breathing room. That's an incredible competitive advantage.
Massive.
But it can't just be a free-for-all.
Right. Far from it. The application process forces companies to prove their architectural maturity. You must submit comprehensive system descriptions, a detailed benefit assessment outlining why this technology will help Texas residents.
You have to prove the value.
Exactly. And incredibly robust mitigation plans. You have to prove, on paper, how you will handle a data breach or an algorithmic failure before you are ever allowed to turn the system on.
So no flying by the seat of your pants.
None. And once you are in, you are mandated to submit quarterly performance reports. The state is essentially watching over your shoulder as you build.
But in exchange, you get an enforcement shield against the Attorney General for those specific waived regulations.
Right. And what's fascinating here is there is a massive catch that I think defines the entire philosophy of Texas governance in 2026.
Okay, what is it?
The dual-track approach. The sandbox gives you an enforcement shield for waived bureaucratic regulations. It does not grant you a waiver from the core TRAIGA prohibition.
Okay, the way I think about this is it's like getting a special permit to test drive an experimental prototype race car on public roads.
Okay, I like this.
The city might give you a waiver that suspends the speed limit on a specific highway for your test, right? They waive the bureaucratic rule about how fast a car can go.
Right.
But they are absolutely not waiving the laws against driving drunk or plowing through a crowded pedestrian crosswalk.
That analogy hits the nail on the head. The sandbox waives the friction of compliance, but it does not waive the fundamental ethics of human safety.
Right.
You get 3 years to test your autonomous loan approval AI without jumping through traditional banking license hoops. But if that AI starts intentionally denying loans to a protected class,
The shield drops.
the sandbox shield vanishes instantly and the Attorney General will prosecute you under TRAIGA. The ethical guardrails are simply non-negotiable.
So we have these immense legal structures, this carefully controlled sandbox, but why did the state government feel the need to step in so heavily in the first place?
It was a breaking point.
Because why couldn't they just let the free market self-regulate data management like they usually do?
Because the free market was losing the war. Bad data management evolved from an IT headache into a catastrophic financial contagion.
Wow.
We reached a tipping point where data breaches were wiping out mid-sized firms completely and causing multi-billion-dollar swings in the stock valuations of global enterprises.
So it became a macroeconomic issue.
Exactly. The government stepped in because the economics of insecurity in 2026 became an existential threat to the economy itself.
The numbers in the research are just staggering. Let's look at the baseline. In 2026, the United States still suffers the highest average data breach cost globally.
We have hit an all-time regional high, $10.22 million per incident on average.
It's insane.
That is a 9% surge just from 2025.
A $10 million mistake. I mean, for a Fortune 500 company, maybe that's a rounding error, though the shareholders obviously won't like it.
Definitely not.
But for a mid-market logistics firm or a regional hospital network, a $10 million hit is an extinction-level event.
They close their doors. Let's focus on healthcare, actually, because that sector illustrates the mechanics of these breaches perfectly.
Yeah, let's talk about healthcare.
Healthcare remains the most targeted and expensive industry, suffering an average cost of $7.42 million per breach.
Why is healthcare always at the top of this list? I mean, the data is incredibly valuable, obviously, medical records, social security numbers, but why are they so vulnerable?
It comes down to a metric called dwell time.
Dwell time.
This is the total time it takes an organization to realize they have been breached, the mean time to identify, plus the time it takes to kick the attacker out, the mean time to contain.
Okay, so the total time the bad guys are in the house.
Exactly.
Yeah.
In the healthcare sector, the average total dwell time is a terrifying 279 days.
Wait, 279 days?
Yeah.
That is over 9 months. How does a hacker sit inside a hospital's network for 9 months without triggering a single alarm?
To understand that, you have to look at the physical infrastructure of a modern hospital. You have traditional IT servers, laptops, HR databases, but you also have operational technology, or OT.
Like the actual medical machines.
Right. MRI machines, CT scanners, smart infusion pumps. In 2026, an estimated 83% of medical imaging devices are running on unsupported operating systems.
Oh my God. So you have a $3 million MRI machine taking incredibly precise scans, but the computer running it is still using like an embedded version of Windows 7 from 15 years ago.
Yes, because the software is tied to FDA approvals.
Ah.
A hospital can't just run a Windows update on an MRI machine without voiding the manufacturer warranty and potentially violating medical compliance.
So they're stuck?
The manufacturer won't patch it because they want the hospital to buy the new model, so this multi-million-dollar machine sits on the network with a known permanent vulnerability.
And I imagine hackers know exactly how to exploit that.
Oh, absolutely. They don't attack the heavily guarded firewall. They find the IP address of an outdated ultrasound cart. They use a known exploit to gain a foothold on that cart, and from there, they use legitimate administrative protocols to slowly, quietly move laterally through the network.
They just sneak around.
They aren't smashing windows, they are quietly picking locks from the inside. Security tools are looking for massive downloads to Russia. They aren't looking for an MRI machine sending a slow trickle of Active Directory hashes over standard ports.
And that is how you stay hidden for 279 days.
Exactly.
What about the financial sector? You would think banks have the budget to lock this down.
They do, and finance has a much shorter dwell time, usually between 168 and 233 days.
It's still pretty long.
It is, and the costs are still astronomical, averaging $5.56 million per incident. But the attack vector is completely different.
Really?
Yeah, it's not outdated hardware, it's the human element. 78% of incidents in the financial sector involve stolen credentials.
So the attackers aren't hacking the mainframe like in the movies, they are just logging in.
Literally. They send a highly sophisticated AI-generated phishing email to a mid-level manager. The manager clicks a link, enters their password, and the attacker now has legitimate credentials.
And the system doesn't know the difference.
Right. The network defenses just see a verified user logging in at 2:00 p.m. on a Tuesday. There is no malware to detect.
And speaking of AI-generated threats, there is a completely new variable driving these costs up in 2026, the shadow AI premium.
Oh, this might be the most insidious cultural shift we are dealing with right now.
Shadow AI, that refers to the unregulated, unauthorized use of artificial intelligence tools by everyday employees, right?
Yes.
Give me a scenario of how this actually happens, because I don't think most employees are maliciously trying to sabotage their own companies.
Not at all. They are just trying to be efficient.
Right.
Imagine an analyst in the finance department. They need to summarize a 50,000-row spreadsheet containing sensitive client investment portfolios. Doing it manually will take 3 days. So they find a free, web-based, large language model, upload the entire spreadsheet, and ask it for a summary.
Oh, no.
They get their summary in 10 seconds and look like a genius to their boss.
But they just uploaded 50,000 confidential client records into a public AI that might use that data to train its future models.
They bypassed every single data loss prevention tool the IT department built. They created a massive compliance violation.
Just to save some time.
And furthermore, these unauthorized tools generate a staggering amount of anomalous network traffic. Security operations centers are being flooded with alerts caused by employees installing sketchy browser extensions or rogue AI plugins.
The research refers to this as the burnout to breach pipeline.
It's a very real phenomenon. Security analysts are spending hundreds of hours a week chasing down false positives generated by Bob in accounting trying to automate his emails.
They just get exhausted.
They get so exhausted by the noise that when an actual Russian threat actor begins exfiltrating the database, they miss the alert. That shadow AI factor alone adds an average premium of $670,000 to the final cost of a data breach.
So AI is clearly the weapon of choice for the attackers, and it is the cause of massive internal leaks via employees. But the data shows that AI is also the only viable defense.
It is the paradox of modern cybersecurity.
Yeah.
The sheer volume and speed of AI-driven attacks mean human analysts can no longer keep up. If a threat actor is using an autonomous script to test millions of stolen passwords a second, a human watching a dashboard will never spot the intrusion in time.
Right.
Fully deployed, AI-powered security automation is the only effective countermeasure.
It's literally machines fighting machines at a speed humans can't comprehend.
Exactly. AI-driven anomaly detection learns the baseline behavior of every user and device on the network.
Okay.
So if that mid-level manager's credentials are stolen, the AI notices that while the password is correct, the typing cadence is wrong.
Oh, that's smart.
The IP address is unusual, and the user is attempting to access a database they haven't touched in 3 years.
And it reacts.
The AI automatically isolates the account in milliseconds before the exfiltration even begins.
And the financial ROI on that speed is undeniable. The equation is incredibly simple. Speed equals savings.
Absolutely.
According to the 2026 data, breaches that are identified and contained in under 200 days cost an average of $3.87 million. But if that life cycle exceeds 280 days, the cost balloons to over $5.01 million.
Because every single day an attacker is in your system compounds the damage.
Right.
Organizations that have fully deployed AI security automation see an average cost saving of $2.22 million per incident compared to those relying on manual processes.
Wow.
The security AI literally pays for itself the very first time it stops an attack early.
Let's break down that $10.22 million average cost, though. Because I think people assume that money is just, I don't know, the ransom payment paid to a hacker or a fine paid to the government.
A lot of people think that.
But the hidden costs are where companies truly bleed out.
The ransom and the regulatory fines are just the headline costs. The most devastating financial impact is actually lost business and churn.
Ah.
That accounts for 29 to 31% of total breach costs.
Because when a customer finds out their credit card or medical history was stolen, they leave.
They leave, and they never come back.
The trust is broken.
That is revenue that vanishes permanently. Then you have the detection and forensic investigations.
Which aren't cheap.
Not at all. You have to bring in elite third-party incident response teams to figure out how the breach happened, which servers are compromised, and what data was taken. Those teams charge massive premiums, averaging $1.47 million per breach.
And after you find out what happened, you still have to fix it. Post-breach remediation.
Right. Buying credit monitoring for 1 million affected customers, hiring crisis PR firms.
Physically replacing hardware?
Yes.
Okay.
Physically re-imaging hundreds of compromised servers, or replacing legacy OT devices like those MRI machines we talked about. Remediation averages another $1.62 million.
Man, when you look at the complexity of this managing legacy hardware, fighting AI with AI, handling multi-million-dollar forensic investigations, it's completely obvious why the IT industry is desperate for experienced leadership.
There is a massive talent gap in incident response and infrastructure leadership right now.
I can see why.
And this is vital for the working professionals listening. If you are already in the IT field, you have your certifications, you're working the help desk or doing system administration, but you want to be the person leading the response to these multi-million-dollar crises.
You need the credentialing.
You need the strategic credentialing to get into the room. This is the specific use case for the BAS in Information Technology at Tarleton's Dr. Sam Pack College of Business.
Right.
It is a degree completion program designed specifically for professionals who already have training and field experience, but need to finish their degree to take on higher-level strategic roles.
It's about taking your hands-on experience and adding the strategic architecture knowledge necessary to combat these exact infrastructure threats.
Exactly. You move from being the person reacting to the fire to the person designing the fireproof building.
You need leaders who understand the entire board, not just a single server rack.
Well said.
Which brings us to the most abstract, yet arguably most destructive aspect of big data. We've talked about the financial costs of a breach, which you can measure on a balance sheet.
Right.
But what happens when the data isn't stolen by a hacker? What happens when a company legally collects data, but uses it in a way that just destroys their reputation?
This is the frontier of the responsibility gap.
Okay, the responsibility gap.
Yeah. As organizations hand more power to autonomous algorithms, it becomes increasingly difficult to assign blame when an unethical outcome occurs.
Because it's just the machine doing it.
Exactly. And over the last 2 years, we have seen massive corporate crises that prove algorithmic bias and aggressive data aggregation can destroy a brand's reputation practically overnight.
The source materials highlight 3 massive case studies from 2025 and 2026 that perfectly illustrate this. Let's start with case study number 1. LinkedIn's Quiet Harvest from late 2024 into early 2025.
This was a profound wake-up call regarding user trust.
What happened?
LinkedIn quietly introduced a new privacy setting that automatically opted millions of users into allowing their private messages and professional profile data to be used for training generative AI models.
They just flipped a switch in the background?
Yep.
So a private message I sent to a recruiter negotiating a salary or, discussing a sensitive career move was suddenly being ingested by a massive neural network.
Without explicit upfront notification.
That's crazy.
The backlash was instantaneous. It triggered class action lawsuits in California and drew severe interventions from data protection authorities across Europe.
I remember that.
When privacy experts did the post-mortem on this crisis, they identified 3 catastrophic ethical failures.
Okay, let's go through them. The first failure was a complete lack of transparency, specifically violating a concept called contextual integrity. I want you to unpack that because it's a fascinating way to look at data.
Contextual integrity is the idea that data should only be processed within the specific context in which it was voluntarily provided.
Okay, give me an example.
If I give you my resume on a platform designed for professional networking, the context is human-to-human job seeking.
Right.
If you take that same resume without asking and use it to train an autonomous AI model to write better cover letters for other people, you have violated the integrity of that context.
You took the data out of its intended lane.
Exactly. And the second failure made the PR crisis infinitely worse: retroactive processing.
Wow.
When users found out about the quiet harvest and rushed to their settings to opt out, the company initially stated that opting out would only prevent future data collection.
Wait, so what about the old data?
It would not affect data that had already been ingested and used to train the models.
Wow, so it's like, we will stop taking your water, but we are keeping what we already put in our pool.
Which is a massive retroactive breach of trust. Once data is baked into the weights and biases of a large language model, you cannot easily extract it. The harm cannot be undone.
Right. And the third failure was cross-entity sharing, also known as purpose creep.
Yeah, there were allegations that this profile data wasn't just staying inside the network platform, but being shared across other business entities for personalized advertising.
Which just destroys user confidence.
Completely. The precedent set by the Quiet Harvest was clear. Innovation cannot outpace ethical responsibility. You cannot operate on an ask for forgiveness later model when dealing with generative AI.
The public simply won't tolerate it anymore.
They won't.
Let's look at case study number 2, which brings the focus back to Texas. The 2025 lawsuit involving Allstate and a company called Arity.
This one is unsettling.
It is, because it involves data people didn't even realize they were generating.
In January 2025, the Texas Attorney General launched a landmark lawsuit alleging the unlawful collection and sale of precise geolocation data from over 45 million consumers.
45 million. And the fascinating mechanism here is how they got the data. They didn't just track users through an insurance app.
No.
They used SDKs, software development kits. Can you explain how an SDK creates this kind of hidden vulnerability?
An SDK is essentially a pre-packaged bundle of code. Let's say you are building a generic app to help people find cheap, gas-like Gas Buddy.
Okay, familiar with that.
You want to include a map feature, but you don't have the time or money to build a mapping system from scratch. A company like Arity offers you a free SDK that handles the mapping and location services.
And it saves you tons of work.
It saves you 500 hours of development time, you drop their code into your app, and you're good to go.
But the hidden cost is that the SDK acts as a backdoor for the company that wrote it.
Exactly. When the user opens the Gas app, the Arity SDK wakes up and begins tracking their precise location, their speed, and their braking habits. The user thinks the app is just finding a gas station, but the SDK is siphoning their physical telematics data back to a third-party server.
And the AG alleged that data was used for deceptive scoring, right?
Yes. They analyzed your acceleration, your late-night driving habits, how hard you brake, and generated a driving score.
And this score was then weaponized to raise insurance premiums or deny coverage entirely.
Without the driver ever explicitly consenting to being monitored for insurance purposes.
The defense was the standard industry response, wasn't it? It was disclosed in our privacy policy.
Of course. But the core of the Attorney General's argument rests on the failure of notice. Burying a vague, highly technical sentence on page 35 of a Terms of Service agreement does not constitute informed consent.
Right. A reasonable consumer downloading a gas finding app would not anticipate that their literal physical movements were being sold to an insurance subsidiary to inflate their premiums. This highlights that big data isn't just Social Security numbers and credit cards anymore. even metadata GPS coordinates, accelerometer readings from your phone. If it is aggregated and used to make consequential financial decisions, it triggers the absolute highest level of regulatory scrutiny.
The risk profile is determined by how the data is applied, not just what the data is.
Okay, case study number 3. And for anyone navigating a corporate career, this is the most alarming trend we are seeing: algorithmic ageism and the creation of the diamond-shaped workforce.
This crisis emerged in late 2025 within the financial services and banking sectors.
Okay.
Several major institutions deployed sophisticated AI models for automated recruitment. The goal was to optimize hiring, process resumes faster, and theoretically remove human bias from the initial screening process.
But instead of removing bias, the AI just scaled it up to industrial levels.
Because machine learning models are trained on historical data, they look at who the company hired in the past, who was promoted, and who succeeded.
And historically, the tech and finance industries have favored younger, digitally native candidates.
Exactly. The AI analyzed the data and learned that proxy markers, like graduating from college within the last 3 years or listing certain modern coding frameworks, were highly correlated with being a good hire.
So it learned to be ageist.
It did. It systematically filtered out older, highly experienced workers whose resumes didn't match the historical profile of a 24-year-old analyst.
Wow. It inadvertently codified historical discrimination into an autonomous filter.
But the ripple effect of this automation created a secondary crisis that management consulting firms are calling the pedagogical crisis of 2026.
Because these AI agents didn't just take over recruiting, they took over the actual work.
Right. Banks deployed AI to handle document review, basic code maintenance, preliminary financial modeling. These are traditionally the tasks assigned to junior entry-level employees.
The exact tasks you assign to a 22-year-old fresh out of college so they can learn how the business actually operates.
By automating those tasks to save on payroll, these companies effectively eliminated their entry-level roles entirely.
Wow.
Now look at a traditional corporate structure. It has always been a pyramid, a wide base of junior employees learning the ropes, supporting a smaller tier of middle managers, leading up to a small executive suite.
But if AI eats the bottom of the pyramid, the structure collapses.
It morphs into a diamond. The bottom point is tiny, virtually no entry-level hiring.
Okay.
The middle swells massively into a bloated layer of AI reviewers.
Wait, what do they do?
These are mid-level employees whose entire job is just babysitting the autonomous agents, checking their outputs for hallucinations.
That sounds awful.
And the top remains a small executive tier.
So the question I have to ask is, where do the executives of 2036 come from?
It's a huge problem.
If you erase the entry-level jobs today, you are erasing the training ground for tomorrow's leaders. How does someone become a senior vice president of risk assessment if they were never allowed to be a junior analyst actually running the numbers?
You can't.
We are breaking the corporate ladder and replacing it with a black box.
It creates an unsustainable talent pipeline. And the public is acutely aware of the danger. Recent sentiment analysis shows that 58% of consumers now distrust brands that use AI for high-stakes interactions like hiring or lending.
Over half.
Yeah, the fear of being judged by an unfeeling, unexplainable machine has created a massive crisis of trust.
So we have painted a fairly terrifying picture.
We have.
Decentralized data causes chaos and privacy violations, like we saw with LinkedIn and Allstate. Unregulated AI causes structural nightmares, like the diamond workforce. How does an organization actually survive this? What is the architectural solution in 2026?
The debate over how to organize data has finally ended. In 2026, the undisputed gold standard for enterprise architecture is the hybrid data governance model.
The hybrid model, also referred to as federated domain ownership.
Yes.
The core philosophy being centralized standards, decentralized execution.
Yeah.
And the outline uses a great historical analogy here. It compares this data evolution to the battle over how to distribute electricity.
It is a brilliant parallel. Think back to the early days of the electrical grid. Thomas Edison championed direct current, or DC.
Okay.
It was highly centralized and very safe, but it couldn't scale. You needed a power plant every few miles because the voltage couldn't travel far.
That sounds exactly like the old central data warehouse approach.
Yeah.
Every piece of data in the company is controlled by one isolated IT team in the basement.
Right.
It's secure, but if the marketing team needs a new report, they have to submit a ticket and wait 3 weeks. It creates a massive bottleneck.
Then Nikola Tesla introduces alternating current, or AC. It is distributed, highly scalable, and can travel vast distances.
Right.
But if you don't manage it with strict transformers and safety protocols, it is incredibly dangerous.
That is the decentralized data mesh.
Yeah.
Every department, HR, finance, sales, builds their own databases and uses whatever tools they want.
Exactly.
It is incredibly fast, but it leads to complete chaos. You get data silos, duplicated efforts, and massive compliance violations because no one is enforcing a global standard.
So, the hybrid model is the modern electrical grid. It takes the scalable power of Tesla's distributed AC, but applies strict, centralized safety standards to ensure the system doesn't melt down.
I see.
You build a centralized fabric, usually a data lakehouse, that dictates the global security rules, the compliance policies, and the access controls.
The rules are centralized.
But the actual execution happens in federated domains. The marketing team owns the marketing data. They are responsible for its quality and analysis, but they must operate their domain on the centralized rails provided by IT.
Why has this hybrid approach become mandatory right now?
3 tectonic forces are driving this. First, the rise of agentic AI.
Okay.
By the end of 2026, 40% of enterprise applications will use autonomous agents. Now, consider how an AI agent functions. It needs to query data to make a decision.
Right.
If you have a decentralized Wild West, the marketing department might define customer churn as a user who hasn't logged in for 30 days. The finance department might define it as a user who canceled their billing subscription.
So if the CEO's autonomous AI assistant asks the system, what is our current churn rate? It will get 2 completely contradictory answers depending on which database it searches.
Which leads to catastrophic automated decisions.
Definitely.
The hybrid model solves this by enforcing a governed semantic layer. This is a centralized translation engine.
So everyone speaks the same language.
It ensures that no matter which department's AI is asking the question, the mathematical definition of churn is identical across the entire organization.
The second force is regulatory fragmentation.
Yes. We spent a lot of time on TRAIGA in Texas, but Colorado has the CAIA, California has its own frameworks.
It's patchwork.
A purely decentralized model invites accidental violations. The HR team in Austin might deploy a recruiting tool that violates a law in California without realizing it.
So the hybrid model fixes that.
The hybrid model utilizes a central compliance center of excellence. They write a regulatory policy once, and the architecture pushes that rule out globally to every single domain simultaneously.
That's incredibly efficient. And the third force is data quality ROI.
Right. Companies running mature hybrid models see a 40% higher return on investment for their analytics.
That's massive.
They stop spending money cleaning up bad data and start using high-quality data to drive revenue.
But I want to talk about the mechanics. How do you actually enforce these centralized rules across a massive decentralized company? The industry term is governance as code.
It is the shift away from human manual review. In the past, governance meant a committee wrote a 50-page PDF policy document, emailed it to the engineers, and hoped they followed it.
Which never works perfectly.
Never. In 2026, the policies are converted into code and embedded directly into the data pipeline.
Give me an example of how that works mechanically. Let's look at automated tagging.
Instead of relying on a human to manually flag a document that contains a social security number, you deploy natural language processing models at the ingestion point. The moment a raw file enters the data lakehouse, the AI scans it, identifies the PII, and automatically tags it with the appropriate security classification before it is ever saved to a table.
That's brilliant. And then you have dynamic masking. I find this to be the most elegant solution for data privacy.
It is incredibly powerful. The database physically alters the result set of a query based on the user's identity and access permissions in real time.
So if a frontline customer support rep pulls up my account, the database intercepts that request, recognizes their role, and dynamically masks my data.
Yes.
The rep only sees the last 4 digits of my credit card and my first name.
But if a senior billing auditor pulls up the exact same account using the exact same query,
The database recognizes their higher clearance and shows them the full unmasked data.
the data isn't duplicated, the view is manipulated dynamically.
Wow. And perhaps the most critical capability for surviving a TRAIGA audit is lineage tracing,
Oh, absolutely.
building a literal pedigree for every single data point.
It creates a visual, directed, acyclic graph showing exactly where a piece of data originated, every transformation it underwent, and every AI model that used it.
So you can trace it all the way back.
When the Texas Attorney General demands to know how your algorithm reached a biased conclusion, lineage tracing allows you to mathematically prove exactly which dataset fed that decision.
Allowing you to isolate the problem and prove your compliance.
Exactly.
Building a system capable of automated tagging, dynamic masking, and lineage tracing that requires serious architectural expertise. You don't just learn this over a weekend boot camp.
You don't. It requires deep, specialized knowledge in distributed systems. And for those looking to build a career in this space, you really have to decide which side of the hybrid model you want to manage.
Okay, what are the options?
Well, if you are drawn to the deep technical execution, actually writing the governance as code, building the dynamic masking protocols, that is the exact focus of the BS in Computer Information Systems at Tarleton.
It is a highly technical track.
Very. But if you want to be the architect designing the overall hybrid strategy, the leader deciding how the central fabric interacts with the business domains, that is what the Master of Science in Information Systems is engineered for.
For the big picture.
It prepares you to enter leadership positions, giving you the strategic vision to guide an entire organization through this transition.
It is about finding where you fit in the modern ecosystem. We have covered an immense amount of ground today, and I want to synthesize all of this by bringing it back to our opening hook.
Let's do it.
We started with the terrifying reality that a single data mistake now costs an average of $10.22 million.
The stakes are existential.
We have clearly seen that the era of ask for forgiveness, not permission, is dead.
Completely.
We have officially entered a compliance by design reality. Whether you are navigating the intent-based liability of TRAIGA, the absolute consumer rights of the TDPSA, or the ethical landmines of algorithmic bias, the pressure on your data systems has never been higher.
But, the opportunity has also never been greater.
Very true.
If you use the regulatory sandbox to innovate safely, if you deploy AI to secure your network and eliminate that 279-day dwell time, if you enforce the hybrid governance model with automated tagging and lineage tracing, you stop playing defense.
You turn responsibility from a corporate burden into a competitive advantage.
Exactly. You build trust. And in an economy run by autonomous agents, trust is the only currency that retains its value.
Thank you to everyone for joining us on this deep dive.
Thank you for your time. And again, if this breakdown brought value to your work or your studies, please like, subscribe, and share this with your network. And don't forget to visit my YouTube channel for the visual breakdowns of the hybrid architectures we explored today.
You will definitely want to review those diagrams. Make sure you join us next week, too. We are continuing our exploration of autonomous systems with a deep dive into episode 172026, Predict or Perish. Machine learning in supply chain.
That's going to be a good way.
We are going to look at how these agentic systems are taking control of physical logistics globally. You won't want to miss it.
Before we go, I want to leave you with a question to reflect on as you return to your projects today.
Okay.
Look at the data systems you interact with. Your CRM, your dashboards, your marketing analytics. If the regulators walked into your office tomorrow and demanded that you mathematically prove the lineage of your data, where it came from, who consented to its use, and how your AI is interpreting it, could you do it?
That is the ultimate stress test.
It is the reality of the landscape. If you are genuinely motivated to be the person who can confidently answer yes to that question, and you are ready to take ownership of your career path, I highly encourage you to explore the programs at the Dr. Sampak College of Business at Tarleton State University.
A great place to start.
It is an incredible investment for those seeking a flexible, highly practical, and future-focused leap in their professional journey.
Remember, in the age of big data, your greatest asset isn't the vast amount of information you hold, it's the integrity with which you use it. Until next time, keep learning, keep questioning, and keep building.